Welcome back. This is week 12 of Fantasy Central. This is your host, Zach, and I'm here with the fantasy guru, the expert, the guru himself, Jeffe.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I can't believe it's already week 12 of the NFL.
Dude, I know. Week 12, what the fantasy regular season ends in, 2 weeks for most
Regular
people?
season, 2 weeks, yep.
Jesus. All right, before we hop in here, how'd you do over the weekend?
Same old thing. Another one. I'm still without my top 3 running backs. Well, I guess Saquon was back, but I didn't play him because I didn't know what his workload was going to be like. If I would have played him, I would have won, which is unfortunate. I had Zach Ertz on my bench because Mike Gesicki's been great for me this year. So another tough week where I barely lost even without my top 3 running backs. So much of the same in that league. But one of the random leagues I'm in, I'm 11-0. And I've scored the most points, and I'm whooping everybody. Obviously, there's some managers that don't worry about their team, but even still, that's the one I care about at this point. I'm undefeated, so I'm riding with it.
I don't blame you. I had a pretty rough weekend. Both my lineups in both my leagues looked very strong, had very favorable matchups. The points just didn't come. My other league, I was ahead heading into Monday night. He had Tom Brady and Chris Godwin. I forget how much I was up, but he ended up squeaking out a winner on me. Pretty much eliminated my chances. I think I have 2% chance of making the playoffs at this point. So just not a very good overall season for me. I'll be honest and admit that. However, I did deal with a lot of injuries, and I just saw it every single year, man. I don't get it. I am like I'm the guy or the top 2 on who gets scored against the most. It happens to me every single year, and I don't understand it.
Yeah, that's one of those things. It's just luck at that point. You can't even control that.
I know, man. But all right. Shout out to all of our WUBI Live radio listeners. We appreciate you guys sticking around as a Horseman Pro Football Talk podcast just finished up. Reminder to all of you out there, you can catch the Horseman Pro Football Talk and Fantasy Central back-to-back on the WUBI Live radio. The app is available for free on your app store, so head over there, check it out, WUBI Live, Ubiquity Radio. You can also go to WUBI.live for more information, or you can also stream from their website on your browser. If you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, or simply listening on your favorite podcast platform, we also appreciate you guys. Hit that like, share, subscribe button. Help us continue to grow. Like we said earlier, only 2 weeks left in the fantasy football regular season for most of you. As always, Jeffe is going to run down some guys that may be available out on the wire, followed by his top 10 fantasy running backs and wide receivers for week 12. We'll finish up with some guys you should be starting or sitting if you have them on your roster. Today is Thanksgiving, so first and foremost, we want to wish you all a very happy and safe Thanksgiving. In the words of the great Pat McAfee, we absolutely have no idea why you're listening to us right now, but we fucking love you.
You're damn right. I couldn't have said it better myself.
All right, so without further ado, let's get to a week 12 waiver wire. Only the Chiefs and Cardinals are on the bye week this week. So if you're in need of a guy on your roster to fill in, who are you targeting on the waiver wire?
All right, so this first guy, I saw him on a couple of waiver wires in some of the leagues that I'm in, and I thought, it's just managers that aren't participating in all their leagues, when people do random leagues. So maybe he didn't get picked up. But Darnell Mooney for the Bears, he's been their number 1 receiver all year long. He's wide receiver 30 for the year, which at wide receiver 30 means he's been at least a flex option most weeks at this point. And in this last game, he got 23.1 points. They only scored 13 points as an offense, but he had 23.1 fantasy points. He had 16 targets with Robinson out of the game, and the downside there is he only catches 5. Right. Both quarterbacks were under 50% completion. So quarterback play is what's going to limit his potential. But somehow this guy's only rostered in 53.4% of ESPN leagues. And I don't understand it because he's been producing most weeks this season. So if he's in your league with the playoffs coming up, you have Tyreek Hill out this weekend. You have all the Cardinals receivers out this weekend. Darnell Mooney needs to be started week to week in the NFL or in fantasy football right now. So go and pick him up. Next receiver here is going to be Elijah Moore. another guy who somehow, some way has only been rostered in 40% of leagues in ESPN. He's wide receiver 38 on the year. He's obviously come up more of late, and in this last game, he has 29.6 fantasy points, 11 targets, 8 catches. He has 4 touchdowns in his last 3 games. There's no reason Elijah Moore should not be starting every week right now. And just before we started this recording, Mike White and Joe Flacco were put on the COVID reserve list, which means Zach Wilson, no matter how banged up he is, he will be coming back to play for the Jets. They've already announced that. So does that hurt his value? I don't know. Elijah Moore didn't start coming on until Zach Wilson was out of the lineup. So something to monitor, but the way he's been playing, I'd say he's a surefire, at least flex option every week right now. Next guy here, I don't know how valuable he's going to be down the stretch, but if you need a fill-in guy, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine for the Titans might be a pretty good option. He's wide receiver 74 on the year. His only value comes when Julio's out, because then he becomes the number 2 wide receiver for them. But look, they have no Julio, no Derrick Henry, and they might not have A.J. Brown. He plays through injuries most of the time. But if they don't have A.J. Brown, or if A.J. Brown is limited in his physical ability and not able to do what he normally does, it all means that Westbrook-Ikhine is basically going to be the number 1 option. So should see a decent target share in the game for the Titans. So for a 1 week ad, maybe a 2 week ad, I think Nick Westbrook-Ikhine is a good option. And the last receiver that I have here is going to be Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who is currently wide receiver 82. He's missed a couple games and this and that, right? He's not always consistent, doesn't have the greatest hands. But in this last game, he had 22.3 fantasy points, including 4 catches in the game after having 10 targets, which is a nice target share. He had a 75-yard touchdown. Aaron Rodgers, pretty much every game MVS plays in, he tries to hit him on a long touchdown. So you always have that potential with MVS. And with Allen Lazard being hurt and possibly missing this upcoming game, from what I'm hearing, he's probably going to miss at least this game. So MVS should be a nice fill-in option. Obviously good quarterback play here. So if he's out there in your league and you need a guy to fill in for Tyreek Hill or Christian Kirk, Rondale Moore, any of those guys, MVS could be that guy.
Yeah, I don't really have a whole lot to add. I do like Darnell Mooney. I have him in one of my leagues. He's been in and out of the starting lineup depending on the matchup, but he has been producing the last few weeks especially. So I like the pickup there if he's on the wire. Same thing with Elijah Moore. Don't really have a whole lot on the other 2 guys, so I'll take your word for it. You're usually spot on with these kind of things on the waiver wire. So there's your 4 waiver wire wide receivers. Looks like you got a couple running backs and a couple quarterbacks you also want to talk about.
Yeah, we got 1 running back this week. Well, I guess, yeah, kind of 2. Same team. It's going to be Ty Johnson and Tevin Coleman. I didn't know, which one to go with. Obviously, Ty Johnson brings in the passing game value, but will they use him as a runner? It doesn't look like it. After Michael Carter left the game with an injury, and he's already been confirmed going to be out at least 2 weeks. So Tevin Coleman ended up getting 5 carries to Ty Johnson's 1. And, it's not a great sample size, and it's not a whole lot of carries. They were down in that game to the Dolphins the entire time. So they were passing a lot with Joe Flacco. But with an injured quarterback coming back a little too soon because the other guys are on the COVID list, I think that Ty Johnson and Tevin Coleman can both have some kind of value. I wouldn't start them the first week. Hopefully you have other options this week. I would be very nervous about both of them this week. But if you had to play one in week 12, I'd say Tevin Coleman. But we'll revisit this topic after week 12 to see what happens with these 2.
Yeah, heard that. I like Ty Johnson a little bit here. Tevin Coleman as well. It's a favorable matchup this week, so they may be able to produce the points. You just never know with this Jets offense, right? So, if they're on there, you need a fill-in. These are guys that could definitely have a decent ceiling for this matchup, particularly maybe even going forward, like Jeffe was talking about. So, not bad there on the running back pickups. A couple quarterbacks you want to discuss.
Yeah, so the first one here has got to be Cam Newton, right? And his last game, he got 26.6. His first game with the Panthers, he obviously had the 2 touchdowns. The running threat is there, and he had another rushing touchdown. This one in his last game was a long rushing touchdown, and I believe the offense for the Panthers is going to continue to get better week after week with Cam Newton. He's going to get comfortable with the people he has around him again. Obviously, being back with CMC, we saw that chemistry in the last game, and I think it's going to keep getting better. And I mean, Cam said it himself, he's back, and I think he's going to have a big impact. He should be should be rostered in every ESPN league. Again, the rushing ability with Cam and the chances he'll get around the goal line are too good to pass up. He must be rostered in more leagues. I believe currently going into the waiver wire this week, he's only rostered in just over 40% of leagues. So he's out there in a lot. Go pick him up. The next guy is actually going to be Trevor Simeon, which if you listen to our last podcast, you heard me talking about how Trevor Simeon is not that guy, pal. He's not a guy that's going to lead them to a win, and I believe that. But with him at quarterback and the fact that they get down in games and the offense hasn't been working, there's a lot of garbage time that's been happening. And surprisingly, he's the number 3 quarterback over the last 3 weeks because of so many garbage time yards and the touchdowns at the end of games. But you should expect him to throw an interception late to just kind of end the game. So, dock 2 points off from what you think he'll get. But, I mean, he's shown a decent floor. Should get you at least double digits, so that's good. So if you're looking for somebody, to fill in for a Patrick Mahomes or Kyler Murray, Colt McCoy, whoever it may be for this weekend, Trevor Simeon again gives you a nice floor. Could be that guy.
Could be. I'm completely avoiding Simeon, to be honest with you, but I definitely see the potential that could be there. I do like Cam Newton. I picked him up last week. Even though they lost, he still put up some decent, just kind of average fantasy points for me. I think I had Carson Wentz on the roster. I think he scored a couple more than Wentz did last week, but that's because they gave Jonathan Taylor the ball 90% of the time, and he balled out. But I like Cam Newton. I think he'll definitely get acclimated, and he'll definitely be able to produce going forward. So, all right, there's Jeffe's Week 12 waiver wire pickups. He's got 4 wide receivers on the wire. He's got kind of 1-2 running backs, the New York Jets, Tevin Coleman, Ty Johnson, running backs on the wire, and also quarterbacks Cam Newton and Trevor Simeon. So there you have it. Let's move on to Jefe's top 10 running backs for week 12. Who is going to ball out and have a great performance this week? We will start with, as always, number 10.
Number 10 in week 12 is going to be Antonio Gibson, who, despite the injuries that he's had, is starting to look good again. Since the Washington bye week, he's looked good. Terry McLaurin's looked good. The offense has looked much improved. Better quarterback play. And with him playing well lately and going up against a pretty weak run defense in Seattle, they're 31st in terms of fantasy against running backs. So for me, Antonio Gibson is a must start this week. I do believe he'll be a top 10 running back, and I have him at number 10 for week 12. Number 9 here is going to be David Montgomery going up against the Detroit Lions, who are 29th in terms of fantasy against running backs. And this is assuming the Bears will be able to hold a lead, right? It's the freaking Lions. Like, I know you and Brad predicted the Lions to win this game against the Bears. I predicted otherwise, so I think the Bears should hold a lead in this game. In doing so, David Montgomery should be the guy that's getting the run and eating the clock and getting this game over with, because the Bears aren't a great team. They don't want to let this one linger. So I think David Montgomery has a pretty good day here, and I have him coming in as the 9th best running back in week 12. The eighth best running back in week 12 is going to be Nick Chubb, going up against Baltimore, who we've talked about again and again. The defense is just not as strong as it once was, largely due to injuries on the defensive side of the ball. And I think, with with Baker Mayfield's injuries, you have to rely on Nick Chubb here. Nick Chubb, Dearness Johnson, but of course, more so Nick Chubb. He gets so many touches, which brings so much good production. You have to assume he's going to get in the end zone once, maybe even twice in this game. I think he has an opportunity to maybe even be a top 5 back, but because of the way Cleveland's offense has looked over the last couple weeks, I wanted to be conservative a little bit with it, and I have him coming in as the 8th best this week.
Yeah, I really like David Montgomery this week. I actually have him on my must starts, which we'll get to later on in the show. Last week, Montgomery struggled. He only had 58 yards on 14 carries, 1 reception, no touchdowns, and I think he had like 7 fantasy points or something like that. But this week, like you said, the Bears are taking on the Detroit Lions, and on my defensive rankings, I have them ranking 31st in the league in run defense. They're also 31st in rushing yards given up per game. So I definitely think the Bears will take advantage of Montgomery. He's coming back from injury. He's been back in 2 games. They had a bye week in between there. So he's getting back into the groove of things. I think this is going to be a very big game for him. So I like that. Nick Chubb's. He's one of the best in the league. I could definitely see him up there. Antonio Gibson against Seattle. Seattle is just complete garbage all the way around. I will hate on them every single week from here on out. So I, without a doubt, can see Antonio Gibson also having a big game. You have him slated there at number 10. So number 10, Antonio Gibson on your list. Number 9, David Montgomery. Number 8, Nick Chubb. And number 7 is?
Gonna be A.J. Dillon going up
against A.J. Dillon.
Yes, sir. An absolute powerhouse. Didn't have as good a game as I thought he would have for the Packers against the Vikings, but he still came away with like 17.7, I believe it was. And going up against the Rams, I mean, if you watch the Rams game, obviously the Colts played the Rams, so I watched that game. I've watched, 3 or 4 other Rams games this year. They're not always solid against the run. For as good as this defense, we always say it is, they're a good defense. They're still one of the better defenses in the league, but not always consistent against running backs. They're 12th in terms of fantasy against running backs. And look, with no Aaron Jones, it's still going to be no problem. I just think A.J. Dillon, with the power he brings, obviously Aaron Donald can still smack him up a little bit, but A.J. Dillon just brings a different threat to the game. And as the game wears on, it's like the Derrick Henry effect. It's going to wear down the defense. So I think in the end, A.J. Dillon has more than enough opportunity and talent to be able to have another top 10 week. He's going to come in at number 7 for me this week. Number 6 is going to be Dalvin Cook going up against the 49ers, or 19th in terms of fantasy football against running backs. And like what this comes down to is that Dalvin Cook is a beast. He's in a very good offense, and with his usual volume, he should be able to produce pretty well here against the 49ers. They're not the greatest team against the run, and so I think there's going to be more than enough opportunity for Dalvin Cook to eat in this game. I think they're going to want to control this game and keep San Francisco from getting in a rhythm on offense, and they don't want the Niners to get up in this game. They play a lot of close games this year, and I think they're going to try to avoid that in this one. Dalvin Cook going to be a big part of that. He comes in at number 6 for me.
Yeah, I agree. I love Dalvin Cook this week as well. He's also on my stardoms. He is one of the most dynamic and top fantasy players the league has had the last few years. He's posted back-to-back 20-point games. And this week, like you said, the Vikings are taking on a very weak 49ers run defense. I like Cook to have another huge game, possibly here. He may just come out as the number 1 overall fantasy player for week 12. I know you have him listed here at what number? Number 6? Yep. But keep in mind, put it in the back. He might come out number 1. I have the faith. And A.J. Dillon, I like A.J. Dillon. We were raving about him last week. He didn't really have a big game, but he can definitely bounce back against the Rams. So I also like him there too. So with that said, we'll move on to number 5.
All right. Cracking into the top 5, we have him here every week. It's going to be Naji Harris against Cincinnati, who's 28th in the league in terms of fantasy when it comes to stopping running backs. And, I mean, there's not a whole lot to say. I feel like we say the same thing every week. Like, it's Naji Harris, the volume he gets, the talent he has, no matter how bad that offense is, he's generally going to be a top 5 running back. So I had to put him somewhere, and because it's a good matchup for running backs, I felt like 5 was a good place for him this week, and I could definitely see him hitting that. Number 4 for me this week is going to be DeAndre Swift against Chicago, who's actually 10th in the league against running backs, but DeAndre Swift is just so talented. Like I believe I've said it before, if he was in a different situation, people would talk about him so much more. He would be, a guaranteed top 5 running back. I think skill-wise, he's a top 5 running back in the NFL. And the analysis for having him at 4 is a lot of the same of what you just heard me say about Naji Harris. Like, we talk about the same stuff. He gets the volume. He's got all the talent. And I think that he's going to have a big game here again. I think Detroit's going to be trailing Chicago, so the passing game value is going to help push him up higher into the top 10. He comes in at number 4 for me this week. Number 3 is going to be Austin Eckler going up against Denver, who's 8th against running backs in terms of fantasy. But look, 41 points is pretty damn good in any week. He had 4 touchdowns. 41 points wasn't enough to be running back number 1 for week 11, which is kind of crazy. But with the touches that he gets and him being involved in the pass game and how talented he is, he's somebody that I just feel like I have to put here. He's been right behind Jonathan Taylor and Derrick Henry all season long in terms of fantasy points per game, and I think he's going to do it again. Denver. How do you? We talked about this before. When you're attacking Denver, you have to do it with the running back, and mostly in the run game because their corners are so good. Austin Eckler should have a very good week once again. Comes in at number 3 for me.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add with these 3 guys. Najee Harris, DeAndre Swift, and Austin Eckler, they're up here every single week. They have almost been the most consistent throughout the course of the season, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it sure seems like it. It's pretty much every week they're top 10. So, they're, again, we talk about them, every week, and I feel like I say the same thing. So just know those guys are probably in the list every single week.
Yeah, especially with their passing game upside. They're just always going to perform, especially if you're in a PPR league. They're going to put up the points, and they should have pretty big weeks yet again this coming weekend. So with all that said, here we are, the top 2, and no surprise with these guys, but I'll go ahead and let you have the honors.
Yeah, so number 2 is going to be CMC, a guy that I love putting at number 1, but couldn't this week because CMC, he's going up against Miami. Miami is 15th in terms of fantasy against running backs. And with CMC looking like he's all the way back, he's very heavy, I believe, the leading receiver for the Panthers, which when that happens, I mean, that's what the Panthers do. CMC is the best player on the field for them, and he looked like it. And so, he was an obvious pick to be somebody that goes up there, especially with Cam being there and Cam opening things up even more for CMC is going to be even more valuable. So CMC, I could see him being number 1, but I have him coming in at number 2 this week because number 1 is the number 1 running back in fantasy by a 40-point margin. And that's Jonathan Taylor. After what he has done, we could talk about just one game, but look at what he's done lately. It's been, people are talking about 8 straight games with 100 scrimmage yards or more, but how many games over the last 5 has he had 200 scrimmage yards? It's got to be 3 or 4 at this point. He is absolutely dominating. He's getting into the end zone at an insane rate, and so he's the obvious number 1. He's a number 1 player in all of fantasy football right now, and I think it's going to continue. He had a tougher matchup against Buffalo than he does against Tampa Bay, and the Colts are playing at home. I like Jonathan Taylor to have another monster game here.
Yeah, I can't really add a whole lot. The Colts, I think they have finally figured out that if you give Jonathan Taylor the ball, good things are going to happen, whether he's doing it or it opens up the field for their offense as a whole to improve. So hopefully, and I believe they will, continue to give Jonathan Taylor the ball, let him do his thing. He's stepping up in the passing game. So no doubt, hands down, number 1 on the week. Although I did say Dalvin Cook may just come out as a top fantasy performer, but it's hard not to have Jonathan Taylor slotted in here because other than Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor is right there. And I will say that he has passed Derrick Henry on the yards. I know it took him to 2-3 more games, but he has a better yards per carry average than Derrick Henry did, and that's something.
Yeah, by a wide margin, I should add. Like, that yards per carry is a wide margin. He has like 25 less carries still and has like 200 more yards. And that's just rushing yards. We're not even talking about his passing yards, passing touchdowns. Like, I think, overall, I haven't looked at it, but he's got to have pretty close to 1,500 total yards for the year.
Yeah, something like that. He's an absolute monster, and I am fucking glad he is on the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah, no kidding. Great draft pick by Chris Ballard.
Absolutely. So, all right, Jeffe, you want to run down and summarize this top 10 real quick?
Yep. So number 10 is going to be Antonio Gibson playing the Seahawks. Number 9, David Montgomery against the Lions. Number 8, Nick Chubb against the Ravens. 7 is A.J. Dillon against the Rams. 6 is Dalvin Cook against San Francisco. Naji Harris is number 5 against the Bengals. Number 4, Deandre Swift against the Bears. Number 3, Austin Eckler against the Broncos. Number 2 is CMC against Miami Dolphins, and number 1, of course, is Jonathan Taylor going up against the Bucs.
There it is, Jeffe's Week 12 top 10 running backs in fantasy football. We will go ahead and move on to his top 10 wide receivers, and of course, we will always start down there at number 10.
Number 10 this week for me is going to be Michael Pittman Jr. A little bit of a disappointing week, but again, the Colts just gave the ball to Jonathan Taylor 35 times. Like, there wasn't a whole lot of throwing to be had, in a rainy game. So didn't expect much, going into that game. Well, I expected him to be a top 10 going into the game. But for what it was, I understand why he didn't perform, but I think he will this week. Going up against the Bucs, who we've talked about time and time again, how the Bucs secondary with the injuries, they've been exposed in the past. And I think with JT being the main attraction for the Colts, right, they have to pay attention to where he is at all times. The play action is going to be a big deal in this football game. And with the weakness in the secondary for the Bucs, I think Michael Pittman Jr. and T.Y. Hilton even are going to have enough opportunity in this game to be able to get open, find a space in his zone or get past a man and man coverage. And Michael Pittman Jr. has the added ability to be able to moss pretty much anybody at this point. So I think Michael Pittman Jr., because of Jonathan Taylor, will be limited in what he's going to be able to do, but I think he can continue to be a top 10 wide receiver and put up, somewhere between 18 and 21 points in this game. So he comes in at number 10 for me this week. Number 9 is going to be Jamar Chase going up against the Steelers. And look, Pittsburgh doesn't have a great secondary. Even with getting some guys back from the COVID-19 list this upcoming week, I think Jamar Chase is going to have more than enough opportunity to get open. He gets plenty of targets in these games. And this is a game that the Bengals need to win. I mean, I guess it's a must win for both teams, but the Bengals have showed more promise, right? And they're still in the playoffs at this point. They need to win this game to stay in that playoff picture and to be a real threat to people week to week. And I think Jamar Chase is going to be a big part of that. So Jamar Chase, another top 10 week for him, coming in at 9 for me. Number 8 is going to be Elijah Moore, going up against Houston, who is 19th in terms of fantasy against wide receivers. And with Moore becoming one of the best young wide receivers in the NFL, even with less than stellar quarterback play, this is a sure thing. He's had 4 touchdowns in the last 3 games, and he's balling out right now. So Elijah Moore is somebody that I think will continue to get a nice target share and will continue to burn teams, especially a bad team like the Texans here, who actually did just get 4 interceptions in a game, but I think that's more of an anomaly than what we're going to see transpire here this upcoming Sunday. So Elijah Moore, number 8 for me.
Yeah, I really don't have a whole lot to add to what you have already said. I like Michael Pittman. He's a big, tall receiver. Carson Wentz he's definitely looking for Pittman throughout the course of the game. Jamar Chase, him and Burrow been balling out all season. Elijah Moore is showing who he truly is. So I like all 3 of those guys, and I don't really have a whole lot more I can add. But hey, that's why you're the guru. Let's move on to number 7 here.
All right, number 7 here is going to be Scary Terry McLaurin. who has also looked very good since the bye week happened. He's putting up points again, going up against Seattle, who is 14th in terms of fantasy against wide receivers. And with Scary Terry looking like he's coming back to form, I think he's going to have a good day against a struggling Seahawks defense. The whole team for Seattle is struggling right now. So Scary Terry, another guy that I think, because of the way that offense has looked, is going to continue to produce. I'm going to believe that until they show me otherwise. So he comes in at number 7 for me. Number 6 is going to be Chris Godwin, going up against the Colts here this weekend, who is 27th in terms of fantasy against wide receivers. My analysis for Chris Godwin is basically the exact same as it was for Stefan Diggs last week. Stefan Diggs I had at number 6 for last week, going up against the Colts, and he ended up getting into the end zone as I predicted he probably would, and caught a couple balls. This was even with all the rain that was happening. Had a pretty good fantasy day. And Chris Godwin here, he's just so talented. And again, the Colts give up one of the highest completion percentages in the NFL this season. So I think Godwin is good enough to take advantage of it. And just a side note, the last time these two teams played was down in Tampa Bay. Me, Zach, Brad, and Zach's brother Tyler went to that game, and I watched live as Chris Godwin absolutely torched the Colts, and Jameis Winston threw for over 400 yards. So I know Chris Godwin is going to enjoy seeing this defense again. It does scare me a bit. Again, we saw him kill us live. So I think Chris Godwin has more than enough chances to be a top 10 guy this week. Comes in at number 6 for me.
Yeah, I remember that. I won't beat a dead horse and talk about it again. But yeah, I remember that. Chris Godwin, he's an absolute monster. He, like I said, this last week, him and Tom Brady kind of ruined my hopes and dreams when it comes to fantasy football, because they both ended up making me lose my matchup. But I do like Terry McLaurin. He is on my must starts this week. Yet again, here I am talking about how trash the Seahawks are. They're giving up 280 passing yards a game, which ranks 29th in the league. And they haven't given up 14 passing touchdowns on the year. Yeah, I think scary Terry McLaurin here is going to come up very big against the Seattle Seahawks. So, all right, number 5 on your list, a guy who seems to be up here every single week.
Yeah. I clearly have a lot of faith in this guy. I have a lot of faith in his quarterback to get things right. It's going to be Stefan Diggs. They're playing in New Orleans, so they don't have to worry about weather, playing in a dome. But this is a very pass-happy team. We've seen that the run game isn't there. Josh Allen's their biggest run threat. So I think Stefan Diggs, he's had a couple of good weeks here. And so I think he's going to continue that. The New Orleans is 29th in terms of fantasy against wide receivers. And look, when you need to win a game, you go to your best players. Bills need to figure out how to win this game on Thanksgiving. And so I think Stefan Diggs is going to abuse Marshawn Lattimore, because, I paid a lot of attention. I've wondered why Marshawn Lattimore over the last couple of years has been inconsistent. Some games he is an absolute shutdown corner, and some games he's getting torched. And, obviously if you pay attention to fantasy or pay attention to the Bucs at all, you know that anytime Mike Evans plays Marshawn Lynch, he gets locked down. When Marshawn Lynch plays the bigger, not agile receivers, Marshawn Lattimore, is able to have the good game. But when he plays these quicker and more agile receivers, he can't stick to them like he normally does. So Stefan Diggs should have a good week here. And I just wanted to throw that tidbit in there. If you like DFS football, pay attention to those matchups when Marshawn Lattimore is playing against more agile receivers, because he usually gets taken advantage of in some regards. So Stefan Diggs, number 5 for me this week. Number 4 is going to be Justin Jefferson going up against San Francisco. I don't know who they're going to go to. Some days it's Adam Thielen. Some days it's Justin Jefferson. Some days they run the ball 40 times. So, this is more of a, this one is really a prediction. I really just think Justin Jefferson should be talked about. He's a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL. in my opinion. And San Francisco doesn't have the greatest secondary. So what do I think the Vikings are going to do? I think they're going to continue to put up points like they've been doing every week. That offense seems to be matchup proof. Nobody, even the Packers, who had been playing great defense, couldn't stop them from putting up over 30 points. So San Francisco is going to get beat this week, in my opinion. Justin Jefferson is going to be a big part of that. He comes in at number 4 for me this week. Number 3 is going to be another top 10 mainstay. That's Debo Samuel going up against the Vikings, who are 26th in the NFL against wide receivers this year. And he can do it from anywhere. You know, we've seen him score from the backfield multiple weeks in a row. Obviously, he's one of the better receivers in the NFL. Definitely top 10, an argument there for top 5. And so with the talent that he has and the amount of touches that he's getting and the creativity in Kyle Shanahan's offense to put the ball in his hands, Debo Samuel, a top 5 guy for me every week, and I have him at number 3 this week.
Yeah, I can't really argue. You know how I feel about Stefan Diggs. I think he's definitely a top 5 wide receiver in the league. I know they struggled last week against the Colts. He still ended up putting up some decent amount of points. I think he will continue to do that this week as well. Justin Jefferson, another guy who is always up here in the top 10 and has a very high ceiling. Debo Samuel, he has shown up this year, proven that he is for real, and so well-deserved as being number 3. And of course, he would be number 1 if it weren't for these top 2 guys you have on your list. So hats off to Debo Samuel, but man, these other 2 guys every single week, they're putting up even better numbers.
Yeah, I mean, these guys, as long as neither of them are on a bye week, they're just interchangeable at 1 and 2. And number 2 this week for me is going to be Cooper Kupp, who is still the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy even after the bye week. They're going up against Green Bay, who obviously can be taken advantage of through the air. I think, with this being a copycat league, we're going to see Cooper Kupp and Odell Beckham Jr. take advantage of some of the things Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen were able to. And he just sees too many targets for him not to be at the top of this list. Again, number 1 wide receiver in fantasy still. So he's my number 2 guy this week. And my number 1 guy is going to be Devante Adams, going up against the Rams, who are 15th in the NFL against wide receivers, in a matchup that I'm very excited about. You have Jalen Ramsey against Devante Adams. I know Jalen Ramsey's been playing more all over the field in a role that's probably better suited for a big corner like he is. So will he stick to Devante Adams the whole game? Probably not, like we would have seen in the past, but still something to watch this week. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. This should be a great game, and Devante Adams is going to do what he normally does. He's probably going to score. He's probably going to get 12 targets, maybe even 15 if Allen Lazard is out. So Devante Adams, easy number 1 pick for week 12.
All right, there you have it. You want to run down and summarize real quick?
Yep, we got number 10 is Michael Pittman Jr. against the Bucs. Number 9, Jamar Chase against the Steelers. Number 8 is Elijah Moore against the Texans. Number 7, Scary Terry McLaurin going against the Seahawks here. Number 6 is Chris Godwin playing the Colts this weekend, cracking the top 5. Stefan Diggs against the Saints. Number 4 is Justin Jefferson against the 49ers. Debo Samuel at number 3 going against the Vikings. And Cooper Kupp, Devante Adams are 2 and 1.
There it is. Hefe's week 12. Top 10 wide receivers for fantasy football. All right, we are running out of some time, so we're going to do a quick surefire start them, sit them real quick. We're going to start with the running backs. We've already talked about Dalvin Cook and David Montgomery this week. I also want to throw in Ezekiel Elliott, get Hefe's opinion on this real fast. Ezekiel Elliott against the Las Vegas Raiders. Zeke's been dominant all season, posting double-digit fantasy points in every game except way back in week 1 this week. He's been limited in practice with a knee injury, so keep an eye on the injury report as we get closer to game time. But if he is good to go, no doubt, I think he will have a monster game against this poor Las Vegas run defense. If he's not good to go, count on Tony Pollard to step up and have a day. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Zeke, it worries me. Obviously, you're going to want to pay attention to what happens to him. But if he plays, they're going to need him to do something. They're going to need Tony Pollard. I think both of them should be started this week. They're going to need both of them because Amari Cooper is going to be out because of COVID. CeeDee Lamb probably almost certainly going to not be able to get off concussion protocol in time for a Thursday game. So they're going to need these guys to step up with Michael Gallup. So if you have them and they're both playing, absolutely, you have to start them.
All right, a couple wide receivers I want to throw out here we haven't discussed yet. The first is Brandon Cooks against the New York Jets. Cooks had an off game last week and a win against the Tennessee Titans, but I think he bounces back this week against a very poor Jets secondary. The Jets ranked dead last in passing yards given up per game at 282 and have allowed 17 passing touchdowns on the year. So with Cooks being the only guy the Texans really have out there, I think he bounces back big this week. What do you think?
If I had Brandon Cooks on any of my rosters, I would play him against the Jets because, I mean, why wouldn't you, right? The Jets defense has been so bad over the last month, but it just seems like since that Mark Ingram trade, he just checked out. He made it public on Twitter that he was not thrilled about that move, and he just hasn't been there. So if he doesn't get it done against the Jets, he's droppable. Like that. That's it for me.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. I mean, I can't blame the guy. Look at the turmoil that organization has had, and then getting rid of Mark Ingram like that, like they did for practically nothing. So yeah, I can definitely understand that. It'll be interesting to see what he does this week against the Jets. That's for sure.
Yeah, because I always thought that when Tyrod Taylor got back in, it would re-energize Brandon Cooks, but that doesn't seem to be the case thus far.
Nah, I think the problems are a lot deeper than just having your quarterback come back.
Yeah, for sure.
So, all right, another guy I want to throw out here real quick is DJ Moore for the Carolina Panthers against the Miami Dolphins. Miami is one of 5 teams in the entire NFL that have allowed over 20 passing touchdowns on the year. Not only that, but they're also allowing 274 passing yards a game. Their secondary is weak. Definitely a complete reversal than what it was last season. And that's great for DJ Moore and Cam Newton this week, especially when the Dolphins have to account for CMC. So DJ should have a big one here. What do you think?
I think the same thing. We saw DJ Moore finally have a pretty good outing again this last week. I believe it was 16.7. He got into the end zone early. That's a good sign. Cam's going to be looking for him down there. You worry about the touchdown production because CMC is back, and obviously you want to use him near the goal line. Cam could get touchdowns near the goal line. We saw Cam could even run for a touchdown from 30 yards out. So, there's some reason to worry, but again, I think this offense is going to continue to get better with Cam. DJ Moore is the easy number 1 receiver. He's been way better than anybody else on that football team all year long. So I think DJ Moore should continue to be one of the best receivers in the league.
Heard that. All right, that's all the starters I got for you this week with the running backs and the wide receivers. I want to flip it over to the must-sits, guys you want to avoid. I'm going to start this one off with 3, but it's kind of a 3 for 1. I got Matt Breida, Devin Singletary, and Zach Moss for the Buffalo Bills against the New Orleans Saints. Last week against the Colts, the Bills running backs carried the ball a total of 11 times.
In the rain, pouring down rain.
Yeah, that's when it's raining. You got to run the ball, and they just didn't do it. So among the 3 of them, a total of 11 times. And I believe you alluded to this on the Horsemen Pro Football Talk podcast. The Bills have completely abandoned the run the last few weeks. For that reason alone, I'm avoiding these guys as all 3 have very low fantasy relevance. And, oh, yeah, they're taking on a very tough Saints defense as well. What do you think?
No, I completely agree. A month ago, it looked like Zach Moss was going to have consistent flex value, low-end running back 2 value, and that's just dropped off. Again, the only rushing value for the Bills is through Josh Allen. I don't understand what they're doing from a coaching perspective. I don't know how they can't run the ball better. They have a pretty good offensive line. I don't know what they're doing. Maybe they hear all those things being said and they try to change that in this game. But again, it's the Saints defense. And, I think they're going to want to go through the passing game instead of the rushing game because the front for New Orleans is really good. They're pretty good against the run. So, if I have any of the Bills, I do have Zach Moss on like half of my fantasy teams. He will not be playing.
All right, another guy, Alex Collins for the Seattle Seahawks against the Washington football team. Look, Washington's only given up 8 rushing touchdowns on the season, which is tied for 6th best in the league, and they're currently only giving up 98.5 yards per game, which is 5th best. Seattle's offense is struggling. Alex Collins isn't doing shit, and he won't do shit this week. What do you think?
I completely agree. I don't want to play anybody in Seattle's entire team, like a Russell Wilson, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, sit them all. They're all making me nervous. The offense has looked like absolute trash, and I have absolutely no faith that they can turn it around, even against a Washington defense that earlier in the year was getting exposed over the last couple of weeks. They seem to have tightened some things up and changed something during their bye week. So, again, yeah, I'm definitely Alex Collins, but I would also stay away from every Seahawks player this week.
All right, last running back I have on this list is Leonard Fournette for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers against the Indianapolis Colts. Fournette's had back-to-back double-digit performances, but that ends this week against the Indianapolis Colts defense that has only given up 4 rushing touchdowns on the entire season. And you know what, Jefe?
What's that?
Not one of those 4 touchdowns came from Derrick Henry. They shut him down as well. So that's how good this Colts defense is. And if the Bucs are going to beat the Colts, they're going to have to do it through the air. So Leonard Fournette, no go for me this week.
Yeah, this one's tough for me because I think, again, with the way he's been performing and the kind of volume he's getting and the way that offense is, he could.
Not happening this week. Nope, not happening.
But yeah, when you see the Colts give up 100 rushing yards in a game, it's either Derrick Henry or a mobile quarterback that's opening things up. You like Lamar Jackson, or even Josh Allen. I thought the Colts were going to have a problem with Josh Allen. That wasn't a problem. So I do agree. I think it's, if you are playing Fournette, which you probably are, manage your expectations. Again, 10 to 12 points. Probably max, because I didn't know they only gave up 4 rushing touchdowns this year. That's pretty wild. Pretty impressive, honestly, for sometimes as bad as that defense is. That's pretty good. So yeah, if you have another option, somebody that you think might get more than 12 points, go ahead and sit Fournette.
Yeah, I'll just make this quick. Yeah, they're leading the league in rushing touchdowns given up. They've only given up 4, but they are, on the flip side, they have the most passing touchdowns given up. So just a little FYI there. Not good to admit that, but hey, it's stats are stats, right?
Yeah, it evens out.
Yeah. So, all right. Real quick, wide receiver sits. I got the entire Dolphins wide receiver core against the Carolina Panthers. The entire New Orleans Saints wide receivers core against the Buffalo Bills. And I have A.J. Brown against the New England Patriots. Usually it'd be very tough for me to put A.J. Brown on the list, but this week I'm doing it. The Patriots are locking everybody up, having only allowed 13 combined points the last 3 games. They've only given up 13 passing touchdowns on the year, 211 passing yards a game, which ranks 6th best in the league. I did it again. Best in the league, and they have Bill Belichick, the defensive genius, as their head coach. No doubt he's going to have a game plan to shut down the Titans' best wide receiver in A.J. Brown. What do you think about any of those? You want to talk about any of those?
Just that I agree with all those. The Dolphins. Even the only thing about the Dolphins is that they're super pass happy. So any of them could have a good day. It's just picking which one is going to have a good day. But again, all of them are tough matchups, and I would definitely be nervous about all of them, especially that A.J. Brown one. That Titans offense, I don't think is going to be able to do much against that Patriots defense.
All right. That's all we have for you guys this week. We appreciate you all tuning in. Hopefully, Jefe and I were able to provide you with some insight to help get you an advantage in your fantasy league. Oh, yeah. Breaking news from this week. We had a poll running on our website, horsemansports.com, over the last few weeks about which coach would be the first to get fired. Jason Garrett was on that list. So shout out to everybody who voted for Jason Garrett as the first coach to be relieved of his duty this season, other than John Gruden. So shout out to all you guys out there.
Yeah, that's right.
If you're looking to take your fantasy team to the next level, I know we're closing in on a couple weeks to go. We also offer some premium exclusive content you can only find on horsemansports.com. Head over there, check it out. Special limited time Founders deal is available. You do not want to miss out on that. That's horsemansports.com. As always, special shout out to all of our WUBI Live listeners for tuning in. You can catch the Horsemen Pro Football Talk podcast and Fantasy Central on WUBI Live every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. The app is available for free download in your app store, or you can visit wubi.live for more information. Good luck to you all this weekend. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. Have a safe and happy holiday. We appreciate you guys tuning in. We don't know why you tuned in, but hey, we love you. We'll see you next week.